right, hello and welcome. So, describe this rock. That's how we're going to start this today. What would you say? So, what you might say is its shape. So, it's obviously you got this much width, we could say. It's got around this much length. But as we've already mentioned, this is all dependent. So, depending on the speed that the construct around it is moving or that it is moving, it could be changing the length of it. So, or the width. Let's say the width just to make it easier. So this could be slightly smaller and slightly heavier as it's going far, far faster. So we don't really know what it looks like as far as its shape, or we don't really know what is the length and the width. We only know based on the fact that the Earth is rotating at a certain speed. We can also say we don't really know the weight of it as well. Yes, it's the weight we have on Earth, but if you took it onto Mercury, or you took it it's way lighter on Mercury, it's way heavier on Jupiter, because the relative size of the planet makes it have higher gravity, and then you could say it's weightless if it's in space. So there's no real answer as far as what we consider the observable, measurable elements of something. So all of these things, we're kind of taking a snapshot. And we're going to talk a little bit about the color of it in a second here. But we'll take a quote from Einstein here. And he was talking about evolution at this point. But so let me write this down because I didn't put it down. Einstein was saying evolution has shown that at any given moment, out of all conceivable constructions, a single one has proved itself absolutely superior to the rest. So although he's just talking about evolution here, I could make the argument that he's generalizing it more than that. So he's saying that everything about what he was talking about was relativity, and about space and time, and about this being malleable, about nothing being concretely true besides maybe what he would say would be like the speed of light. This is true in things other than evolution. This is true for this rock. So beyond that, though, if we're going to talk about the color, we can say how we don't know anything about the color of it as well. And I'll explain how in just a moment. We're going to start with sound, though. So there's this really famous saying, famous sort of thought experiment, sort of pun idea of like where people will always say this. If a tree falls in the forest and no one's around, does it make a sound? And everybody kind of just scoffs at it. Not all, everybody I shouldn't say, but many people scoff at it. But if we cut this tree down, falls, hits the ground, and everybody will say, yeah, of course it makes a sound. Just because nobody's there doesn't mean it doesn't make a sound. They kind of conceive it sort of like when you close the refrigerator door. I mean, obviously the light turns off because it hits the button, but we don't know that for sure, right? And we can't prove that it's not true. But in this one, there's another level to this. It doesn't make a sound. It makes sound waves. We need a perceiver. We need an ear in order to turn it into a sound. So what we conceive as a sound is just waves at different frequencies and different amplitudes. So frequency being the width between these little bars, which is basically just a wave. Just think of this like a wave in water. And it's the frequency between them. And then there's also the height of it, which will be like the volume. So if it goes really high, this would be a really high peak in the ocean wave, if you want to think of it that way. And this is in air. This is just how we get what we call sound. And this is another call for being open-minded about things. And I always kind of reference this Mark Twain quote for that. It's not what you know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for certain that just ain't so. So often the people that scoff the most at somebody asking this are usually the people that are the most ignorant towards most things. And that's sad. I'm not trying to make fun of them, but it's usually the way they are to a lot of things. To me, it comes from insecurity, but that's another issue. Well, let's think about something else now. So we were talking about the color of the rock. We'll ask, does a rainbow exist? And what I'm going to say, there is conditions that create a rainbow, but we are creating this rainbow. Um, let's start with something that you can look at right now. So it might be hard for most people to believe. Some people may already know this, but this is the exact same as this. It's just this is zoomed in way more. If you have a magnifying glass at home, you can maybe take it to your screen and look at it. But it's actually these three colors just put together really close together. And it's almost impossible to believe until you actually see it. But it's this red, green, and blue right next to each other that we perceive as white because that's the only wavelengths of light we see. But there's many, many, many more. And we'll look at a picture of that in a moment. We've often seen this prism, and what happens is there's these different wavelengths that get bent, and that's what creates sort of this rainbow effect, right? So the ones that have really high frequency are the ones most affected by going through a medium, which in this case is probably glass. So this is a glass prism. So if it's tons of these, it's going to be affected more than the ones that are wider. So it doesn't affect it as much going through something that is a thicker medium. So the red ones, which are wider wavelengths, will come out less affected. These ones on the bottom, these violet ones, will bend more. So that's what we have, is this sort of created situation where these wavelengths have been split enough where we can see them as distinct colors. But keep in mind, they're just basically kind of this. We can see this with animals. So cats can see better at night because they have more rods, but people can see better during the day because we have more cones, which is what perceives color. We have 3 wavelengths that we see. Cat has 2. This would be 0, but there's actually even higher than that. So many butterflies have 4. So they can see more color. And keep in mind, butterflies are usually active during the day, and they care about flowers. So being acutely aware of different colors is very important. But the grand king of this world, or queen, however you want to see it, is this guy. So mantis shrimp. Mantis shrimp can apparently see up to 16 different wavelengths. So you can't really fathom what they actually see. Because we can only see 3. So how this translates as far as perception, people say it's sort of like satellite. They can perceive everything at once, sort of. I don't know. I think that's probably a good guess by some people that have done a lot of research into this, but I don't know really. But anyway, the important thing is to know is that what they're seeing is completely different based on the amount of cones they have, what color wavelengths they can see. And there's all these wavelengths all the time, but some can see more, some can see less. And cats and dogs, dog in the house can only see 2. What's more important maybe though for what we're talking about is that we can only see a very small set of our wavelengths. So if we go all the way from violet, so this is kind of like faster wavelengths up here. This is slower wavelengths down here. If we go from violet to red, this is ultraviolet. This is these are some of these infrareds over here. On the other side, you've probably heard those terms thrown around, but we don't see any of this stuff. So it just doesn't exist to us. I mean, it's there, but we don't see it. And we'll give it a good analogy. You can see TV and radio here. These are quite a bit bigger. Some of these waves are like, the frequency is like a meter and much bigger than that even sometimes. You're also filling in the rainbow that you see. So especially if you close one eye, but it doesn't really matter. You're still kind of doing this process. If you look, there's actually a spot that your eye's not seeing. So it's a little black spot in your vision, but your brain will just fill it in. It'll just automatically do it. And we don't think of that as happening. We think we see what's there all the time, but that's not really the case. Your brain's filling in some spots of that rainbow that we talked about before. There are also going to be parts of that rainbow which have context cues which change what looks like the color. This is a famous example of something that looks like a Rubik's Cube here. But these two colors are actually exactly the same. You can actually maybe I already did it for you too. You can kind of see it's changing color as we're putting a circle around it. But if you take away all the context cues, they're the exact same color. But your brain takes in the information. They see that there's perspective involved here. There's light involved. One's on the dark side, and it makes predictions about what the colors should be rather than showing you what the colors are. A good one is that we can all experience kind of the same. I don't know anybody that doesn't have the same experience with this one. But if you put your finger right in between these two colors, so right in this two area, you'll see that these two are the same color as well, even though the one looks, obviously most people will see this one is almost white. This one on the top will be looking almost gray. But they're actually the same color once you remove or put your finger in between and remove the context cues. So just interesting. This one, I'll just get you to stare at the dot in the center. Maybe you've seen it already, but we'll just talk about this one too. So if you did it correctly, that little spot in the center there, if you were staring at it the whole time, you would see that the image would have turned colored, so perfectly colored, even though there was never any colors in it. I mean, there's the super saturated colors which we have now, but your eyes are cued for the super saturation, that it goes away, even though it's not there for a while. Your eyes are still holding on to the fact that these colors are supposed to be there, these super saturated colors. Perhaps you've seen something like this before, but when we talk about the frequency, so how many of these that go in a row, this determines the hue of the color, and the brightness of the color, so how bright this screen would be, is the amplitude, so how high these go. And if we make this about sound, the frequency is just the pitch. So if it's like a really high ringing sound, these are like when it's really high, or high frequency, close to these together. And if it's a high volume, it's high amplitude. So these are, we have sort of the middle area here. That's a poor spot though, but it's going back and forth. And the higher that it varies is the more we perceive it as high. And we can see the human auditory field just goes from about 20 hertz to 20,000, but these sounds don't exist for us, the ones that elephants and moles can hear, which are less than 20. So infrasounds, and then we always hear about dogs being able to hear sounds we can't. So people talk about dog whistles ad nauseum nowadays when they're talking politically. But anything with a high frequency beyond what we can hear, sometimes dogs and cats can hear it as well, but up to 40,000. And then there's bats and dolphins, which can hear all the way up to 160,000, which is pretty crazy. Rene Descartes, I'm probably saying his name wrong, but we do not describe the world we see the world we can describe. So there's so much more there, but we have tools to see parts of it, and we see parts of it. And senses are like trying to translate a story where we only know 5 letters of the alphabet. So we have a whole story, we know a few of them, and that gets us by. We can understand a little, but meaning can only be understood in totality once we have all of the information, which our senses can't do. Our senses can only take in a very minute amount of information. This is another way we could see it. So we've talked about the matrix laws, and this is as relevant way to see reality as anything in my books. So different frequencies, different symbolic representations of materials, but you can think of it like we only see binary, so zeros and ones, yet there's all these other numbers. So this is the construct of reality, but we only see this and this and this and this. So all this stuff is just ignored because it's not relevant for us. This gets us into what we're going to talk about next, which is the power of the mind and how much this can be influenced. And this is kind of where we're going to really get into things. But we'll leave that. We'll pick it up there tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but someday soon with this. Hope you guys found that interesting. Hope if you have any questions, please put them in the comment section. All right, thank you. Bye.